Welcome back to my channel, I24 News. We're diving into a truly extraordinary escalation in the war between Russia and Ukraine, one that has brought the frontline deep into the heart of Russia's own capital. Picture this: the city of Moscow under drone assault. The headline reads, "Moscow is now hell. War reaches inside Russia. 93 drones strike the capital." What we know so far is unsettling. According to multiple reports, the Ukrainian side launched a massive drone wave targeting Moscow and environs, as many as 93 unmanned aerial vehicles (UAVs) in a coordinated strike. This is not just a border incursion, this is hitting Russia in its nerve center. It raises questions of capability, strategic intent, and the potential for broader consequences. Let's walk through the timeline, the context, what each side is saying, and what this means for the war overall. First, the timeline and the incident itself. While full details are still emerging, sources indicate that overnight, an estimated 93 drones were launched, heading deep into Russian territory toward Moscow. The likely aim: to strike infrastructure, provoke panic, degrade Russia's air defense perimeter, and send a message. While Russian authorities claim many of the drones were shot down, the fact they attempted to penetrate so far raises alarm. The strike displays an expansion in range and audacity of Ukrainian operations. To understand this moment, we must consider the broader context of the war. Ever since Kyiv and Moscow's large-scale conflict began in February 2022, attacks have largely been concentrated in Ukraine, with Russia on the offensive. But over time, Ukraine has increasingly turned its attention to Russian territory, targeting oil depots, ammunition dumps, logistics hubs, and even air bases deep inside Russia. According to a survey of attacks in Russia during the conflict, drone strikes, sabotage and cross-border retaliation have become more frequent. For example, back in November 2024, Moscow was hit by approximately 34 drones, the largest strike on the capital to that point. And in May 2025, Russia reported intercepting a large wave of drones across 13 regions, including the Moscow region. The recent 93 drone strike escalates the conflict significantly. If verified, it demonstrates that Ukrainian unmanned systems are now capable of mounting massed attacks on Russia's heartland, not just its border regions. What does this mean strategically? First, it shakes the assumption of safety behind Russia's front lines and in Moscow itself. If the capital is vulnerable, that raises alarm among Russian political and military leadership. It may force Russia to divert more resources to internal air defense and homeland security, rather than focusing solely on the Ukrainian theater. This redistribution can weaken Russia's forward posture. Second, it signals a shift in Ukraine's posture from defensive operations, waiting for another Russian push, toward offensive pressure deep inside Russian territory. If Ukraine can strike critical infrastructure inside Russia, the war dynamics change, the locus of action shifts, the psychological toll on the Russian population increases, and the cost of war rises for Moscow. Third, there's the symbolic dimension. Striking Moscow is not only about military effect, it's about shaking morale, disrupting normalcy, and sending a message: the war is not confined to Ukrainian territory anymore, it can come to you. And that matters in a conflict where perception and willpower are as important as tanks and artillery. Let's look at the sides' responses. On the Russian side, the Ministry of Defense and state media are first focusing on the narrative of interception success, claiming most drones were shot down, damage was limited, and the attack has been contained. Russian officials have long argued that Moscow was protected from deep penetration drone strikes. For instance, a senior Air Force official said Ukrainian drones have the capability of striking up to 2,500 kilometers, but Moscow has been defended. On the Ukrainian side, while official statements may be cautious and delayed, this kind of operation underscores Ukraine's growing domestic drone manufacturing capacity and willingness to take the fight into Russia. It also shows the strategic logic. When Russia launches attacks across Ukraine, Kyiv's response includes taking the war inside Russia, targeting logistics hubs, energy infrastructure, and now potentially the capital region. There are also risks and potential ramifications. One risk is escalation. As Ukraine steps up attacks inside Russia, Moscow may feel compelled to retaliate more fiercely, not just at the border, but perhaps deeper inside Ukraine or even by resorting to strategic weapons. The threshold for escalation is moving. Another risk is civilian harm and backlash. Drone strikes over populated areas, even directed at military targets, can cause casualties and generate public outrage domestically in Russia. That may harden public support for the war or force Russian leadership into more aggressive responses. For Russia's defense posture, this presents new challenges. Air defense systems, radar coverage, drones for detection and interception, all of these will need upgrading. It also raises questions of logistics and command. How were so many drones launched, routed, controlled? What countermeasures did Russia employ? Can they hold up against larger waves in future? For Ukraine, the operation shows boldness, but also opens them to countermeasures. More anti-drone systems inside Ukraine, more pressure on supply lines, perhaps higher risk for their drone operators. An important dimension is the energy and infrastructure dimension. Many of these deep strike drones, as past incidents show, have targeted oil depots, refineries and ammo dumps inside Russia. For example, in August 2025 a Ukrainian drone wave struck an oil depot in Russia's Kaluga region. The new strike on Moscow may similarly aim to stress civilian military infrastructure, power grids, airports, communication hubs. Disrupting the capital's normal functioning has a multiplier effect on Russia's war effort. We should also focus on how the public will perceive this. For Russians living in Moscow, a city once considered far removed from the war's frontline, the idea of drones overhead is frightening. Even if physical damage is limited, the psychological impact is huge. And for Ukrainians and their supporters, the message is clear: you are not safe if you wage war, the target can be within enemy territory. That can bolster morale. What happens next? We should watch for official confirmation from Russia about damage or casualties, any retaliation by Russia targeting Ukrainian cities or infrastructure, changes in flight operations or airport closures in Moscow, adjustments in Russian air defense posture, e.g., more anti-drone nets, radar upgrades, and Ukraine's response in the days following the strike. This could be a forward step in a new phase of the war, one where attacks are less one-sided and more reciprocal, with territory inside Russia increasingly at risk. In terms of what this means for the war's trajectory, we can identify a few scenarios. Prolonged stalemate with more deep strikes. The war keeps grinding, but with increasing drone and missile strikes on both sides. Moscow and other Russian cities may become regular targets. Ukraine may consolidate logistical and technological systems for long-range UAV operations, while Russia pours more resources into homeland defense. Escalation toward strategic conflict. Russia may respond by stepping up attacks across Ukraine, perhaps targeting longer-range systems, strategic infrastructure, or even deploying heavier weapons to push back. Diplomatic options shrink as each side ratchets up. Negotiated settlement pressure. The fact the war has moved home to Moscow may increase internal pressure inside Russia, public, political elites, economic. That could push Russia toward negotiation or seek some respite, though whether Ukraine would accept anything short of full withdrawal is another question. Technology race. Drone warfare is evolving quickly. If Ukraine continues to field mass drone waves, Russia will need to invest heavily in detection, interception, electronic warfare and counter-UAV nets. This could become a major theater of contest in the war. Before we end, let's reflect on a few key takeaways. 1. The war is no longer contained to Ukraine's territory. The border is porous, and for Ukraine the logic of taking the war into Russia is now established. 2. Moscow's vulnerability is both real and symbolic. Whether or not major damage has occurred, the idea of the Russian capital under threat is a major shift. 3. The drone domain is growing in importance, both militarily, for striking logistics, personnel, infrastructure, and psychologically, for creating fear, disruption, uncertainty. 4. This raises moral and legal questions. The laws of war allow strikes on military targets, but when capital cities, civilian infrastructure, and populous zones are involved, the risks of civilian casualties and escalation climb. 5. The next phase of the war may hinge less on tanks and big offensives, and more on drones, logistics disruption, air defense, and homeland vulnerability. So, as we wrap up, the reported 93 drone strike on Moscow is a game changer. It may not yet mean the war is over or that one side has won, but it pushes the conflict into a new dimension. The front line is no longer just trenches and rural roads near Ukraine, it has stretched to the Russian heartland. For residents of Moscow, for leaders in Kyiv and Moscow, for global watchers, this is a moment to pay attention. Thank you for tuning into I-24 News. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our future coverage of this evolving conflict. As always, I reporting to you with analysis when and where it matters. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video. End.